This is Katrin with Disability Rights New York. Welcome to our podcast, Empire State of Rights Closed Captioned. We are here to bring you information on the most relevant topics regarding disability rights and advocacy. Today, we welcome American Association of People with Disabilities, AAPD's Rev Up and Communications Coordinator, Rachita Singh, and NYU Vote 2020 Fellow, Lilian Aluri. They're here to discuss the importance of voting and its relationship to AAPD's mission and advocacy work. Rachita and Lilian, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having us.
We're really happy to be here.
Well, we're excited to start talking to you about voting. So Rachita, can you talk to us a little bit about your organization? Tell us about the American Association of People with Disabilities. How long have you been an organization, and what is your work like now?
So, American Association of People with Disabilities, or AAPD, was started in 1995 by multiple disability rights activists, some of whom include like Justin Dart, Bob Dole, Tony Coelho, many of whom worked on the ADA that was passed about 5 years beforehand. And they wanted to create a cross-disability rights national organization that was able to reach multiple people with multiple types of disabilities. At that time period, there weren't too many of those kinds of organizations. Many of them were a bit more specific, such as ones that catered specifically towards the blind population or to the deaf community. So AAPD was started as an organization that would kind of reach all of these types of people, bring the whole disability community together. And that is what our focus is right now, is uniting everyone. And we want to try to uplift the whole community by increasing their economic and political power. That is always AAPD's drive. And we try to do that by focusing on multiple issues that affect the disability community, which is actually every issue pretty much, but such as housing, employment, education, all of these issues that most people think about in their daily lives affect people with disabilities the most probably, and a lot of people in the general population don't realize that. So it's not only about trying to help the disability community get through these problems, but also trying to inform, educate the rest of the general population as to how important these issues are and why the disability community should no longer be overlooked. And one of those ways is through voting, which is what Lily and I have been focusing on for quite some time now, through Rev Up, which is our voting initiative, which was started in 2016. It came as an afterthought from a continuation, I guess I should say, from Rev Up Texas, which was started by Bob Casca in Texas, and we kind of expanded it to be more national. So now we have about, I want to say 32 chapters, 32 states. And Rev Up stands for Register, Educate, Vote, Use Your Power, for those who are not as familiar. And we're an initiative that is working to really increase the disability vote. The disability community is the largest minority group, but people don't realize that. Even people with disabilities don't realize that. They don't realize that the power that they have. So we're trying to change that by educating and informing and really encouraging people to go to the polls, to vote in any way they can, and to just express themselves.
And so we've just talked a little bit about how Rev Up is working with your community to really work on and expand the vote for a specific population. But let's talk about why voting specifically is so important to furthering the work of AAPD. I mean, voting in general is super important, obviously, but when it comes to your organization, talk to us a little bit about why it is specifically important for AAPD.
Voting is, I think, the most direct and impactful way for a community or a population to express their opinions, to influence policy, to influence change. So And that is the goal of AAPD, right? We're here to, like I said, uplift the disability community and to make the disability community be more involved in society. And part of that is through voting, right? It's a civic duty. It's a right that we need to really constantly use, that we need to use in order to help ourselves. And if people in the disability community vote more often, we're able to then have the right people in office, the right officials who can provide the right resources for organizations like the AAPD, like other great disability rights organizations in this area to continue doing the work they're doing to provide the necessary services and the necessary help that they can to the people that really need it. It's really hard to be able to help someone with housing or help someone with employment if we're not able to provide them with the resources that we're supposed to gain from the state, local, federal government. And we can't get those resources if we don't put the people that are supposed to provide them in office. But that is why AAPD is so passionate about voting. We just really want to make sure that we are able to support everyone as much as possible, but everyone needs to do that by voting, and everyone needs to take that first step in helping themselves, helping everyone, and like helping the community by the small action, right? It doesn't take that much to just go out there and express yourselves by putting the person that you think can best serve you in office.
And Lilian, talk to us a little bit about how voting can make a difference in the community you serve. Rachita just talked to us a lot about how the importance of voting is specific to the community of people with disabilities. Talk to us a little bit more about that. Expand on how that is really going to make a difference in this community.
Yeah, so when we're talking about voting, getting out the vote, encouraging people to vote, whether you have a disability or not, sometimes feeling motivated and motivating others to vote can be really tough because it can either take a really long time to see results or the election might not go the way that you wanted. But the policies and decisions of our elected officials impact every part of life for folks with and without disabilities. Even if you don't see yourself as a part of the disability community, laws will impact you. And who we elect makes a difference for how accessible healthcare, transportation, education, and so many other critical parts of life are. Policies decide whether or not all public transportation needs to be accessible or just some, or sometimes. And who we elect can decide how much budget is allocated to disability benefits, how difficult it is to apply for and keep those benefits, and it impacts what health insurance covers and whether it covers necessary devices or medication. The disability community is a formidable voting bloc. And so we have the power, as Rachita was saying earlier, to have a huge impact on the policies that shape and guide our lives. So right now, I think it was in the 2016 election, researchers at Rutgers University estimated that there was 35 million potential eligible voters with disabilities. And if you expand that to include household members such as caregivers, family members, siblings, that reaches 62 million possible voters. So that for us and for so many folks that are doing this work within the disability community, that's the motivation for trying to get more folks registered and educated and ready to vote and show them you have the power as a community to change the policies that impact your life. And right now we see a turnout gap, like a voter turnout gap between folks with and without disabilities, which is influenced by stigma, discrimination, facing many accessibility barriers when voting, and just a disconnection when there's not enough representation of people with disabilities in politics. So in 2018, there was a nearly 5% percentage gap in turnout, and we really hope to change that through the work at RevUp. RevUp at its core is about empowering and activating the power of the disability vote to get voters registered, educated, and ready to vote.
That's great. And as you said, there are so many barriers really to not, and this year specifically with COVID, there's barriers for all people getting out and voting. I think it's important to talk about what AAPD is working on right now to help get voters to the polls in November, to educate them about what their options are. There's absentee voting, there's voting by mail, There's a lot of different avenues this year. Talk to us about how AAPD is working on educating the public, getting the word out that there are other ways to vote this year.
And you have it just right when you're talking about the importance of voter education. That's one of our big focuses this year. Misinformation and confusion has been one of the big issues as many states are changing their election rules, trying to adapt to the pandemic, increasing remote voting options. And that's becoming one of the big issues in making sure voters know A, what options are available, B, what accessibility options they have, and if remote voting is accessible or if they'll have to vote in person. And then C, just making their plan to get out and vote and make sure that if they're going to vote remotely, that they do it in time and can make sure that their ballot gets counted, especially for voters with disabilities who may need to make a more detailed plan and have to think about more factors when they're figuring out how and when they're going to vote. Getting to the polls safely, making sure that they can cast a ballot remotely in a method that's accessible to them is so important. Sometimes state websites will have complicated PDFs. Their websites might not be the most accessible. And then even paper ballots themselves, which right now, less than half of the states only offer a paper absentee ballot, which is not accessible to many folks with print disabilities. And so at RevUp, we're trying to kind of bridge that information gap in several ways. So one big one is social media, especially given how the pandemic has pushed so many action efforts, get out the vote efforts online. We've been working really hard on getting social media and digital outreach to get critical information on the elections and key deadlines out to folks that are on social media, might be flipping through their phone. So, for example, trying to make sure to encourage people to vote early if that's possible in their state, or to request their ballot today even, because the sooner people request their ballot, the better chances they have of being able to get their ballot returned on time. Another avenue of trying to make sure that we can get this information out is actually collecting the information on what exactly states are doing, what their election policies and deadlines are, and how they may have changed during this year and during the last few months. So those are kind of two avenues. Other ones are really mobilizing our RevUp partners. So RevUp is a national network. We have partners, member organizations that are in direct contact with their disability community in their local city or state. And so they do a lot of the direct action work in reaching out to potential voters and voters. We have another program new this year, which is the Fannie Lou Hamer program. And it is a program that's empowering and equipping Black disabled activists. And they're actually spearheading a 10-week campaign leading up to the election to get out the vote and really highlight the importance of voting. And just the last piece on that is, I think throughout all of our efforts, collaboration is at the core of what we're trying to do. We're one of many organizations trying to get out the vote and fighting against voter suppression, and specifically trying to get out the vote among the disability community. So working in coalition is really, really important in this work.
That is so much great information, and we'll be happy to post your website information. So if people want to reach out and have any questions or are looking for up-to-date information, they'll have it there. We could talk about voting all day long. There's so much information out there and so much to talk about. Do you have any final thoughts or words of encouragement for our audience before you go?
So thank you, first of all, for having us. Basically, I just want to reiterate the importance of voting, the importance of expressing your opinions and being active in the community, especially now when things seem, I guess, to put it lightly, a little down. Right now is the time for everyone to come together to support each other, especially people with disabilities. This is the time when people without disabilities are kind of feeling how it is to have a disability. In a way, they are finally seeing the effects and the consequences, the circumstances that people with disabilities have been living with their entire lives. So now is the time to make sure that everyone, whether you have a disability or not, comes together, unites, goes out to the polls, and just makes sure, I guess, like I said, expresses themselves. We want to reach every single person. We want to make sure that we're moving in the right direction. There are so many issues and so many problems that have been increasing have been getting worse, but at the same time, there are so many people that are ready to fight and that are ready to support each other. And at AAPD, we're hoping to be one of them, and we're hoping that we're able to be another guiding light, just like other organizations and just like other people out there. And we are ready to help, to support, and we're hoping that others are as well. So definitely reach out to us if you need anything, if you need help and support. And for sure, make sure to go and vote this November and beyond November, no matter what, state, local, federal. It is definitely important to always go and have your voice be heard.
Rachita, Lilian, thank you so much for your time today. It was great talking with you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Empire State of Rights Closed Captioned has been brought to you by Disability Rights New York, your source for disability rights and advocacy. If you enjoyed our program, make sure to subscribe, like, and share this post. If there is a subject you would like us to discuss, please email podcast@drny.org or comment below. Tune in next Wednesday, where we'll bring you more information on disability rights in the state of New York. The closed captioned and ASL version of this podcast is available on our YouTube channel. To listen to more Empire State of Rights closed captioned, follow us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify.